So we found the best companies to talk to about buying your business. Who do we talk to? How do we talk to them? So today's video, we want to dig into the micro considerations of finding the best acquirer for your business. Last video, we talked about who categorically in industry, size, geography, product lineup, what would make someone be a good prospective acquirer for your business. And today we want to say, okay, now that we've found these companies, who do we actually communicate within these companies and how do we communicate with them? So 3 considerations, and the first we want to talk about is roles. And so these are different for private equity and strategic acquirers, and we want to talk about the hierarchy of each. And so within a private equity firm, you're going to see analyst, associate, vice president, director, managing director. And so the managing director within a private equity firm is typically the ones given the task of originating, sourcing, finding new opportunities. Now, some private equity firms, just to add a layer of complexity, have people that are head of business development, head of sourcing, head of origination. Others will not have specific roles for that, and therefore managing director is likely the best person to speak with. Now, looking at a strategic or a corporation, and whether it's owned by private equity or not, it'll be slightly different given that their business is not the business of doing deals, but doing the thing or making the products that they make. And so for a strategic company, ideally, we want to find a corporate development group. And so corporate development within a strategic company tends to be acquisitions, strategic growth, things of that nature. Now, the tricky thing is business development within a company is not the same thing as business development within a private equity firm. So within a private equity firm, business development means finding new deals. Within a company, business development typically means sales, growth, expansion that are organic, let's call it, instead of inorganic, so not relative to acquisitions. And so talking to companies, we like corporate development, and even though business development sounds similar, it's a very different task for the most part. So within corporate development, usually again see that similar kind of hierarchy, given that many of the people in corporate development for strategics have come from the investment banking or private equity world. And so again, kind of that associate, VP, director. Then you'll see director of or head of. They don't tend to use the managing director nomenclature as much, but every firm works differently. But in any event, understanding that hierarchy, understanding who is kind of the intake person to look at deals, to communicate ideas with, is important. So the second variable is going to be communication. How do we actually communicate with these people? And this may be the least surprising variable in anything we discussed today, but this isn't that different than any type of business. People we already know, introductions, network, emails, phone calls, LinkedIn messages, all different ways of communicating. Everybody has a slightly different preference, but you learn those over time and you keep communications clear and candid. And so lastly, and building on that point, is going to be pathway. And what we mean by pathway is that within every firm, whether it's a private equity firm, whether it's a strategic, and they all operate slightly different, you want to understand what their pathway is. And so in some private equity firms, the analysts are going to take the first swing at reviewing a deal. And therefore, when we present it to the analyst, and then it works its way up the food chain to the extent that there's an interest from the group. Now, with firms that like that type of pathway, you don't want to just be dropping things into the email of managing director where they're either going to have to redirect it anyways or just ignore you. And so what we want is to get an understanding of what their preferences are and then just follow along with that, because there's a certain level of I think respect in how people do business that they will then give you more attention for the deals that you ultimately bring them. And that goes the same way with strategics. And some strategics where the director of corporate development wants to take the first pass at everything before they spin wheels on it. And there's other situations where they have kind of the inbound team. And so everybody we talk to within our own databases that we keep here, we always want to make notes of what's the best way to communicate with anyone. And so to sum up the micro considerations in terms of the strategy of communicating and finding the best buyer of your business, it's really 3 things. Understanding the roles, understanding how to communicate, and understanding the pathway of the prospective acquirers. And all of this boils down to kind of our tip of the day, or our secret here is iterations. We're not selling our own book, but this is why we always pound the drum about needing an advisor that swims in these waters every day, is that the iterations allow for further access, allow for better conversations, for better dialogue. And what we mean by this is if we've had conversations with thousands of prospective acquirers, we know how they operate, we know who the people are at the firms, at the companies, we know how they want to communicate, what the pathway is for the respective firms or acquirers, and then we're able to have that level of access, right? Because introductions ultimately lead to relationships, which the next time around, we can just call them directly. So that network grows and grows and grows and compounds, and then we not only from who we're talking to, but for people talking to us, and that we have a reputation. We've had 100+ engagements at our firm now. We've had hundreds from the collective engagements that we've all worked on prior to Hillview Partners. And so when we reach out to people and they see that, whether it's LinkedIn, email, phone calls, introductions, networking, whatever it may be, they know that, okay, this is a real firm. They represent good companies. They have a good reputation. Let's check out what they have to offer. And so that's a big difference from either using a lesser firm or not using a firm at all. So in any event, that's the thought for today. We talked last video about the macro considerations of finding the best buyer for your business. Today's video, we talked about the micro considerations. And so now you get some insight into the process of how we kind of funnel down who's going to be the best acquirer from a company, industry, size, geographic perspective, and then who's going to be the best people to communicate within these firms, within these companies, and pushing that dialogue forward. So that's the thought. Keep pushing forward. God bless. We'll see you next time.